So now, it should come as no surprise to anyone who's watched my channel before that I love The Legend of Zelda. It is hands down my favorite game series, and I could just play these games all the time. Like, usually, if I'm bored and I just want to sit down and play a game for a little while, 9 times out of 10, I'll pick up a Zelda game and just play a little bit of it. Granted, usually I won't beat the entire game, but it's always a lot of fun. So I decided that I want to challenge myself, and I want to try 100% every Zelda game. Mostly every game. So I'm not going to do the multiplayer games, including Four Swords Adventures and Triforce Heroes. Even though I know those have single-player modes, they're really designed for multiplayer. I don't have anyone who's going to want to play them with me, so I'm not going to do those games. I'm also not going to do the CDI games because, let's face it, those should not exist. So now, a couple of other rules I have are that I am only going to do a second quest or master quest if they're different. So like, that would include Zelda 1 and Ocarina of Time Master Quest. So the Zelda 1 Master Quest, or Zelda 1 Second Quest, the dungeons are very different and it's way harder. So I will have to do that to 100% Zelda 1. And then yeah, Ocarina of Time, the Master Quest is different enough that I'm going to say that I would have to complete the Master Quest as well. Other games that have hero modes like Skyward Sword or Master Mode in Breath of the Wild, those are basically the same as the base game, so I'm not going to count those towards my 100%ing. And then also for some games that have multiple releases like Wind Waker or Twilight Princess or Link's Awakening, I'm going to just choose one version. I'm not going to bother trying to 100% all the versions. So like Link's Awakening, I'm probably just going to do the Switch version. I'm not going to do the Game Boy or Game Boy Color. And that's pretty much it rules-wise. So yeah, I'm really excited. This is going to be a bit of a challenge. It's going to probably take me a long time, especially with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But we're just going to go for it. But before we get started, if you enjoy these videos, please leave a like and consider subscribing. And let's get into it. We'll be starting our journey with the 1986 classic, The Legend of Zelda on the NES. Now, I'm going to be playing it on my NES Classic, though I will be using my Super Nintendo Classic controller because I think it has a better D-pad. Alright, so I had a couple goals for what I would consider to be 100% complete in the original Legend of Zelda. So, I needed to collect all the heart containers, collect all the items, get every dungeon map and compass, get both bomb upgrades, and defeat Ganon. And of course, I had to do this in both the first and second quest, since the second quest is pretty different, so I'm going to consider it a requirement to complete. Starting off with the first quest, I knew this would be pretty easy, as I've played the original Zelda numerous times and I already knew where basically everything was without any problem. I have a pretty simple strategy whenever I start. I ignore the dungeons and just go around collecting rupees. Now this is so I can buy the blue ring, candle, magic shield before I have to go into any dungeons, and actually the magic shield is one of my first priorities because the Zora are super annoying in this game. I also get some bombs, and with the bombs and the candle, I can actually get 3 of the 5 overworld heart containers without even setting foot in a dungeon. And once I got 5 hearts, I tried going to get the white sword, and yeah, I didn't have nearly enough health to get past that Lionel. So, I went to finish getting geared up as much as I could. This time, armed with 6 hearts, the blue ring, and the magic shield, I got past him and got the white sword. Now that Link was about as buff as he could be this early in the game, I ventured into the first dungeon, and naturally it's very, very easy. And as a good bonus, I get the most useful item in the game here, the boomerang. We also get the bow, which naturally I forgot to buy an arrow before coming in here. And of course, even though I know my way around, I make sure to grab the map and the compass. So I defeat the boss, grab the heart container, and get the first piece of the Triforce. My only goal before going into the second dungeon is to save up enough rupees to buy an arrow, which I do pretty easily. Then it's time for the second dungeon, and like the first one, it's really simple. Get the pointless compass and map, get the blue boomerang, defeat Dodongo, and get the Triforce piece. Dungeon 3 is where I began to have a little bit of trouble, as it introduces what are, in my opinion, the most annoying enemies in this game, Darknut. The movements of these armored knights make them way more difficult to deal with than they should be, and I lost so much health to these guys that I ended up dying to Manhandlo, which is kind of embarrassing. To be fair, I probably should have just used my sword, but I was trying to use bombs because they're way cooler. Anyway, I was smart and bought a red potion before trying again, and I got through no problem. Before heading to Dungeon 4, I went and got the 4th overworld heart, since I now had the raft and could do that. Then, off to the dungeon we go. Now this dungeon introduces likes, which, ironically, I really don't like. And we have the first iteration of the Gleeok, which seems kinda lame compared to its appearance in Tears of the Kingdom, honestly. Now, having conquered Dungeon 4, I finally had the ladder, so I was able to get the last overworld heart container. With those 5, plus the 4 from the dungeons, I now had 12 hearts, which was enough to get the magic sword. So I headed west through the Lost Woods, up to the graveyard, and I got the most powerful sword in this game. And since I was in the area, I also went and collected the power bracelet, which I don't really need it for anything, just for the 100% completion. Anyway, on to Dungeon 5! Now this is where you can find an actually pretty easy to miss upgrade. Through a bombable wall, there's an old man who will increase your bomb capacity for 100 rupees. Now, since in this game there's no sign of being able to blow up any walls, it's actually really easy to miss this. Luckily, I found it years ago when I was first playing this game. When I reached level 6, I met the bane of my existence, Wizrobes. I hate these guys. A few years ago, I was actually trying to do a no-death run of this game, and I made it all the way to level 9 before I was killed by one of these stupid Wizrobes. And of course, I was killed by one here. Because that's just the kind of luck I have, but eventually I got through. Now, here's where the game gets a little strange. In my opinion, level 7 is way easier than level 6, which you wouldn't think that would be the case. But in level 7, the hardest enemy you have to deal with are only Gorias, which, let's face it, are a bit of a joke. I honestly almost wonder if these two dungeons were numbered wrong. Weird drop in difficulty aside, level 7 is noteworthy for having the second bomb capacity upgrade. Now, unlike level 5, this one is just behind a locked door, so you're not as likely to miss it. And that brings us up to 16 bombs, which is the maximum you can have in this game. And of course, we got our map and compass and the red candle. Not super useful, but still we needed it. For fun before level 8, I decided to go buy another bait. Now, I didn't really need it, but I just thought it would look good in my inventory at the end of the game. But I don't actually consider it part of having the 100%, as I already bought one once before and used it. Well, after that, on to level 8. Now, this was pretty difficult, as this dungeon sees the return of Darknuts, which is just awful. But what's annoying is that this dungeon has 2 items that, in an ordinary playthrough of the game, would be completely optional. That's the magic book and the magic key. The book doesn't really help ever, and in a normal run, the magic key is technically optional, as you can buy keys in shops. However, they both are needed for 100% completion. And as I was trying to get the key, I actually died again, this time to the stupid Goma. It's annoying that you can block the attacks from the statues in the corners with your magic shield, but you can't block Goma's attacks, which look exactly the same. So I lost so many hearts just from not being able to tell if I needed to get out of the way or if I'd be protected by my shield. So yeah, that really sucked. But I returned with a potion, and it was lucky I did because I actually needed that potion to get past Goma. Well, I got the key, book, map, compass, and the last shard of the Triforce, and I made my way to Spectacle Rock. The nice thing about this dungeon is you don't need to go through most of it. Even to get the map, compass, and both items, the red ring and silver arrows, you only need to go into a small part of the dungeon. The bad part about this dungeon? More Wizrobes. I really hate these guys. But eventually I did get all the items, though I did have to actually leave and go get another potion before facing Ganon. And eventually we made it, and I have to say, this really is one of the worst boss fights ever. I mean, you just have to stab randomly and pray that you hit him. I did do it though, and it's a good thing that I bought that potion. So yay, Zelda was saved. Now, time to do it all over again for the second quest. Now, as much as I love The Legend of Zelda, I have to admit the second quest in Zelda 1 is one of the worst things Nintendo has ever made. I rarely play it because it's just so hard, so I knew this was going to be really rough. Unfortunately, I started off with a bit of a bad decision. I went into the first dungeon before getting the shield or the blue ring. Now, this was partly because I wanted the boomerang, which I did get. But it was partly also because I thought to myself, how hard can this really be? Well, it turns out, without the magic shield, very hard. I died to the fireballs from these statues, and the next attempt, I died to the Stalfos. How? Well, it turns out in the second quest they throw swords at you. Why? Yeah, this was the start of me getting very frustrated. So at that point, I went to gear up, and after a couple more deaths, I did get my shield. And at that point, I'd had enough of dying, so I returned to level 1, and making sure to grab the map and compass, I conquered the boss, claimed the first piece of the Triforce, and was exhausted. I had completely forgotten just how brutal the second quest could be. Now sure, maybe it wouldn't be so hard if I had played it more times in the past, but really, this was probably only my second or third time doing it, and because of that, I decided to make use of the internet. Now, I know a lot of people might complain about me looking up maps online, but really, I would be here until Christmas if I had tried to do this without maps. And back in the day when this game was new, you had your friends to share tips and secrets with, or Nintendo Power, which had maps for 6 of the 9 second quest dungeons in the very first issue. So I feel like it's fine for me to use maps from online. Moving directly onto the second dungeon, we came face to face with some difficult enemies, Gibdos and Darknuts. Between them and Manhandla, I decided I just had enough, and I went and stocked up on rupees and bought the blue ring. I probably should have done that from the start, but live and learn. I also got a heart from the graveyard, which gave me enough for the white sword. Now properly armed, and with the red potion in reserve, I returned to level 2, and died to Manhandla again. Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, but then I did make some more progress, getting the recorder and map, before dying again. Alright, well, now that I had the recorder, I could just go and get some more overworld hearts, so that's what I did. There's this one, which I think was actually the first one I found on the second quest the first time I ever played it. Then I actually moved on to level 3, and that's because I knew it was much easier than level 2. Like, look at this, the main boss and heart are actually in the third room of the dungeon. Although that's not near where the Triforce piece is, you still have to go through a couple more rooms, and weirdly the Triforce is only being guarded by Gorias. I wasn't done here though, I still needed the map and the blue boomerang. So I go back in, only to realize that I actually needed the bait to get the boomerang. Luckily, I know the cheap baits in the blue ring shop, which I already got, so I go buy it and rush back to level 3 to get my magic boomerang. Alright, so now I was feeling a lot more confident, so I went back to level 2, and I conquered it with very little effort. It was at this point that I'd had just about enough of the second quest, so I ended up taking a break for about a week. And during this time, I came to the realization that even though this game is a classic, it has aged like milk. The secrets are too well hidden, the movement and combat are clunky, and the difficulty at some parts is just insane. People always like to speculate about what remasters and remakes Nintendo's coming out with. Well, I say they really need to do a full remake of Zelda 1. Of all the Zelda games, it's the one that is the most painful to come back to today. Well, unfortunately, a week later when I returned to the game, I was on level 4, and that did nothing to improve my opinion of this game. Why? Because of the stupid bubbles. The second quest introduces 2 new variants of these guys, red and blue. Now, the regular kind of sparkly ones just temporarily prevent you from using your sword if you touch them. Well, the red bubbles are like that, but on steroids. If a red bubble touches you, Link loses the ability to use a sword indefinitely. The only way to regain use of your sword is to touch a blue bubble. Oh, and they put some of these idiots in the same room as Darknuts. Ugh. Well, I got out of there, and soon I got the book, which is more useless than the second quest, as you don't actually even get the magic rod until level 8. But then I came across something kind of dumb. It's actually possible to get yourself stuck in this game. If you go through secret walls into this area without having a key, the only way out is to attack this old man so the fires will attack you and kill you. Side note, I was only 1 rupee short of getting the first bomb upgrade here, which kind of annoyed me. Well, I was smart the next time. After stocking up on rupees, I returned to the dungeon and I went to that area through the key door. That way, I knew it was unlocked and I was able to get my bomb upgrade and get out alive. Now, in this dungeon, you also do find one of the most irritating parts of the second quest. You come across a room with this old man. Here, he gives you an option for opening the door to continue. Either pay him 50 rupees or lose one of your heart containers. Now, as I want to complete the game with all 16 hearts, I was so glad I had over 50 rupees. Granted, I could have walked back out through the wall that I blew up, but in order to finish the dungeon and get the raft, you have to pay him. Well, anyway, once I reached the Triforce room, I made sure to go through this secret wall to reach the raft before claiming the 4th shard of the Triforce. Before going to the next dungeon, I did a little overworld heart hunting and I got 2 more, which was great. And then Dungeon 5, which saw the return of the dreaded Wizrobes, this time with red bubble friends. Now, I really did not want to deal with that, so I just moved on. And this was a strategic decision too, not just an emotional one. Since I was looking at dungeon maps online, I knew that the ladder was in Dungeon 6. So I went and got that, which really was a lifesaver. Using it, I could get the last overworld heart, which brought me up to 12, so I was then able to finally get the magic sword. Now again, I made use of the maps. I was struggling getting through the dungeons somewhat because of the lack of keys, so looking at the maps, I knew the magic key was in level 8, and as a bonus, I knew that, for the most part, the enemies in level 8 weren't that bad. So, making use of my wonderful ladder, I went to the 8th dungeon. I wasn't really concerned with beating it, I just wanted the key and the magic rod. So I worked my way through the dungeon, with the only real annoyance being the stupid red bubbles again. Well, now being almost as prepared and well-armed as I possibly could be, I returned to the dreaded level 5. I got the bow, which admittedly is really only useful for Goma and Pole's voice, and I conquered the dungeon. Then I was exhausted and I needed another week to recover. I am so glad that I took that break because when I next returned to Hyrule, I was much calmer and therefore able to play much better. And that's a valuable piece of information for many retro games, by the way. If you get frustrated, just walk away, take a break. It really can help. Well, this time, I knew level 8 was pretty easy, so before going to do level 6 or 7, I went back to level 8, got the last bomb upgrade, the heart, and a piece of the Triforce. And yeah, it really was quite easy. Now, since physically level 7 was a lot closer to me than level 6, I went and did that level next, and I got the red candle, which is actually completely pointless if you have both the magic rod and the book, because having the book makes the magic rod's spells make a fireball. Also, boy am I glad that I stocked up on rupees before coming here. This time there was a room with an old man demanding to take a heart of rupees that, if you went into, the only way out was to pay him, so yeah, I am so glad that I had rupees with me. Besides that, the only slight issue I ran into was that I forgot to get the compass on my first pass through the dungeon, but luckily it was in the room directly to the left of the entrance, so I was able to quickly get it and get out again. Now at this point, I had every item in the game except for the silver arrows and the red ring, which are in level 9. So I was able to just rush right over to level 6, and making sure to get the compass and map, I found the most annoying part in any Zelda game ever. In this room, there were red bubbles and a staircase you had to go down in the far corner of the room. However, I knew from looking at the maps that there were no blue bubbles anywhere on the other side of the staircase. So the only way to be able to use your sword past that point was to avoid the red bubbles altogether, and that was a lot easier said than done. I kept getting hit and I had to go back a few rooms to find the blue bubbles and regain use of my sword. It took me a few minutes, but I eventually managed to get to the staircase without the bubbles hitting me. I got past Goma with only 1.5 hearts to spare and claimed the final piece of the Triforce. I did take a few minutes and I double checked that I indeed had got all the maps, compasses, hearts, and items, so then on to level 9. Now, like in the first quest, you can actually avoid going in many of the rooms of this dungeon if you know where to go. So I quickly got my map, compass, and silver arrows. I then had to navigate around rooms with a bunch of one-way doors to reach a staircase that would take me to the red ring. And finally, I had every item in the game, and all that was left was to defeat Ganon. Luckily, the red ring was pretty close to the hidden staircase that would take me to him, and our final battle was pretty easy. Like, I reached Ganon with only 5 hearts, and I was still able to beat him. Now, afterwards, I did actually use my final potion because I wanted full health at the end. And finally, Princess Zelda was rescued, and now Link was truly the hero of Hyrule. So this turned out to be much more difficult than I had anticipated, mainly because this game is just aged horribly, and most of the second quest is realistically impossible without maps. Luckily, I think this is probably going to be the hardest of the games to 100% complete other than Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, so it's nice to get it out of the way early. I mentioned that I think this game could use a full remake, and I stand by that. Yes, it's a classic, but that doesn't mean it has to remain a clunky mess of an NES game. Honestly, with the impact that The Legend of Zelda has had on gaming as a whole, it really deserves a lot more love and attention than Nintendo seems to give it. But still, even with the difficulty and the awkwardness of Link's first adventure, I enjoyed my playthrough. Now, while I have 100% completed the first quest before, I'm pretty sure this is my first time 100% completing the second quest, and while it was ridiculously hard, I did actually enjoy it. Although, I have to admit, I don't think I'll be doing the second quest ever again. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. Do you agree with me that this game has aged horribly, or do you think I'm wrong? Please let me know what you think down in the comments. Well, until next time, so long.